Hello and welcome to the A&P. I am Alex Johansson and my co-host Patrick McCallum. Patrick,
Hello, everyone. How are you getting on?
we're having logical discussions about the state of the world. Let's get into it, brother. Heyo, Patrick, how you doing, bud?
That's all, buddy. So, what have you for me today?
More West Coast of the United States fun out of the state of Washington.
Okay. What's this about?
So it's Brandi Kruse versus Bob Ferguson. Bob Ferguson is the governor of the great state of Washington.
Okay.
Houses amazing cities like, I don't know, Seattle, where there's been lots of awkward riots and things over the years. And, those kinds of fun things. Apparently, AG Bondi sent out a letter, and Mr. Ferguson needed to respond to that. So Ms. Kruse is covering that. So we will let her start cooking. And here you go. Grab your drink. Here we go.
Pam Bondi sent a letter not just to Washington State, but to every known sanctuary jurisdiction saying you have until August 19th to tell the federal government how you plan to dismantle your sanctuary policies. So on August 19th, which was Tuesday, Bob Ferguson cobbled together this press conference, and they had it in the state reception room. And the mayor of Seattle was there, and some state lawmakers and immigrant rights groups. There was like 1 billion people in there with him.
Her letter threatens me, police officers, state troopers, sheriffs, judges, and other officials with prison time.
Right. Yeah. So the sanctuary policies are specifically in violation of the federal supremacy function in the United States, right? So what it does is it severs the tie between law enforcement at a local level and a federal level. It fails to recognize immigration law, 8 USC, U.S. Civil Code, and it decides at the state level that they are just not going to play ball with the Fed, right?
But this is not the first time that state law and federal law have butted heads over marijuana and so on. Not the first time that the federal government.
So at the federal level, marijuana is still illegal, but that's more a function of big pharma, right? There's a lot of things that marijuana does that would make it so lots of drugs that get sold wouldn't be needed, right?
Can states still make their own laws, or are they just going to be jackbooted with federal laws now?
So the state can add to a federal law, but it cannot restrict rights, and it cannot be in direct contravention to the, I'm saying that word wrong. It cannot be in direct opposition to a federal law, right? So if you have X and Y, and X is one thing and Y is mutually exclusive, you can't make a law that is Y, right?
But how does that not apply to, say, the likes of marijuana, where that is completely against federal law?
How does
where states like California and so on have legalized it, but under federal law is still illegal?
So because it is such a minor issue and hasn't been prosecuted for so long, it's just a law that makes other laws weaker. The federal government doesn't have time to chase down anybody who has a gram of weed on their person.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm just saying that there has come times where federal and state laws completely are opposite sides of the fence.
Got it. So, but the marijuana thing is a health and welfare type thing, whereas immigration is an administrative type thing, right? So there's an administrative function, right? It's like the different kind of courts we have. Like the Merit Service Board is a court of law. Family court is a court of equity. The criminal justice system.
I understand all. I understand all that. But what I'm saying is, does it look good that the federal government is stepping in and looks like stepping all over state laws?
Right. The sanctuary policies are allowing those who have illegally entered the United States to remain in these places, right?
Okay.
And they don't say, hey, federal government, we have people who are here illegally. They continue to house and use resources for those who aren't citizens of the United States. Okay. Ireland's got the same thing. The UK's got the same thing. All over Europe, it's the same kind of deal, right?
Yes, same thing, but we kind of handle it differently, if you understand what I mean. Especially in Ireland, I'm thinking of other states in the European Union. Every country is part of the European Union, but we can handle it our own internal matters without the Europeans stepping in too much.
Right. The problem here is that before the state passed the law, they knew the law was not in line with the federal mandate.
And how long have these laws been in place in Washington, for example?
Since the Obama era, at least.
So they've been they were in place in Trump's first term.
Yes.
They were in place.
In many of the places they were, yeah. For sure.
And how come Trump didn't step in that time?
I don't think he had good advice from his cabinet.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I think
I'm just trying to get the timeline right for people who are not from the United States.
Got it. So in his first term, I believe he was still busy trying to identify all of the issues, which is why he came out like gangbusters with all of those executive orders so he could put his program in place, right? And get the people he wanted in his cabinet. But when AG Bondi says, you're going to get prison time if you fail to follow federal law, that's not a threat. That's like the consequence for your action is this. What you're doing is in fact illegal, and this is what consequences look like, right? So a lot of the West Coast has a lot of consequence-free Democrat supermajority things going on. That's Oregon, California, and Washington State.
Yeah, but I've seen in the last couple of weeks and months that certain governors have been threatened with jail time constantly, but there doesn't seem to be a governor being locked up. You understand?
Right. Well, because they're coming in line with what the Fed wants. We have not had a governor who's like not even Pritzker has put up his middle finger, right? Kathy Hochul in New York hasn't either, right? They knuckle under.
Chicago, yeah, but I've seen Chicago.
The city of Chicago is bankrupt, and that mayor is about to get ousted. There's a problem there too. The problem is the top 20 to 25 cities in the United States.
He's got over 70% approval rating in Chicago, onto CNN and other news sources.
That dude's going to get dunked. He is going to get dunked because he can't follow the law, right?
Okay.
He's just not. And again, when Pat Bondi says, if you fail to follow federal law, you could be imprisoned, right? It's a possible consequence for the thing you're doing.
But do you think they will actually follow through with that example? Do you think they will go that far?
If Bob Ferguson doesn't get his business straight, there's going to be a lot of activity in district courts out that way. It's going to get ugly. There's only so much time before the Trump administration is just going to be like, we're done playing with you. Like, we're done. Right? So, all right, let's get going.
Why? Because our state legislature passed a bipartisan law that appropriately and lawfully limits the diversion of state and local resources to federal immigration enforcement. By threatening criminal prosecutions of state officials, this letter embarrasses and disgraces the office of the United States Attorney General.
And then
That's really that's a strange accusation, because it doesn't take a lot to get those systems in line with each other. There isn't going to be a massive outpour of resources to tell the federal government that there are people who are illegally in the United States.
Okay.
There isn't any reason they shouldn't be doing that, because it's a database link up. Hey, this person here in California issues them driver's licenses, right? Which means that the state of California, like the state of Washington, knows where they are if they've registered to operate a vehicle. If you're not a citizen of the United States, you should not be operating a vehicle in the United States unless you have an international license or you're renting a vehicle specifically. But to purchase and continue to operate that vehicle with California plates.
Yeah, I understand all that, but what I'm saying is, it doesn't look good him stepping all over state rights like this. As an optics point of view.
Got it. Okay, so it's not a state right to be in violation of the federal supremacy. That's not a right of a state to do.
How come other states haven't been pulled up for other laws that go against federal law up till now?
I think because we've been complacent.
Okay.
I think that we've just well, they're just going to do whatever they do, and it's just going to be okay. I think it's stopped being just okay to do that, right?
Yeah, but it is a union of states. I presume states,
right? Understand that the NGOs that were getting billions of dollars have been functionally defunded, right? And all that money has been tracked, and we figured out where it's going, right? So a lot of the money that was used to support these kinds of things from the outside have been removed. Those assets are no longer available, right? Without those assets available, then the thing tends to crumble, and those who are outside of what is appropriate action or activity are going to get brought up short, right?
But do you think do you think Trump will send in more troops and federal forces into?
Oh man! All right, so here we run into an issue with Title 10 orders and Title 32 orders, right? So there's a thing in the United States called posse comitatus. Posse comitatus is federal troops are not allowed to do local constituency type stuff, right? Within a state's borders, that state has the ability to enforce their laws as those laws are written, right? So if Trump were to call up the National Guard, it would be a Title 10 federal order, and they could only protect personnel and federal structures. Right?
Oh, I understand. We've gone over this before.
Right.
But what I'm saying from an optics point of view, it doesn't look good to have armed troops on the capital of the country. From
DC?
From outside looking in.
Well, that would be true if the crime rate there wasn't absolutely insane.
But the crime rate has been dropping for the last couple of years, according to their own stats.
Right, because it was manipulated.
Okay.
So when you manipulate the stats, obviously it's going to look like that. So again, the Title 10 order meets with posse comitatus, which means federal troops can't perform local law enforcement functions. If the governor of the state of, say, Washington, Bob Ferguson, enacts the National Guard, it's a Title 32 order, and they'd be under the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, or the equivalent in the state of Washington. And then they are deputized, and then they can perform local law enforcement activities and actions, right? So.
And has any governor done that?
No, many governors have done that. Many governors have done that over the years.
No, but I'm talking about in applying to this new mandates being handed down by the Attorney General.
Since Trump has gotten into office, the only one I think is DC, because he took over the law enforcement arm of DC. He took over the PD there, right? The Metro, right?
But under the way the laws are written, from people outside the United States.
So the
because
district,
of the capital city.
Okay, yeah. So the District of Columbia, or DC, is not within a state's borders. Since it is not within a state's borders, whoever is in charge politically in the district is then in charge of law enforcement. So it's not a Title 10, Title 32 issue. The federal troops that have been activated are actually District of Columbia National Guard, and they are authorized to have law enforcement type powers in DC, except they haven't been used like that. They are not the one who's affecting arrest. It's federal agents, ICE, DEA, all other kinds of three-letter agencies that have been deputized to perform law enforcement functions with the National Guard as backup, with the National Guard with their Humvees and other kinds of vehicles parked about town to ensure that people act nice, right? But they can, in fact, detain in DC based on the current situation with Trump in charge.
But optics-wise, do you think it looks well? Say from an outsider looking in.
They haven't had a murder in DC in 12 days. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good.
They only had 2 murders in May, according to the stats here. I'm just saying that sometimes when you look at statistics, it doesn't seem to match up with the press conferences that were sent out.
Got it. So it looks better in that there are much less homeless on the street. The crime rates have actually not just gone down, but plummeted. My question is where did the homeless people go? I would like to know where they went. I've been unable to track down where the homeless in DC
Did they just ship them out of the capital onto another city, or that's what I'd like to know myself.
Right. I don't know where they are. Nobody's reported on where the heck they went. So, all right, let's see what Brandi's
They just seem to be their stuff seems to be dumped. Looking at the video footage here, it seems to be dumped. Right. They seem to be escorted into some kind of SUV and they're just driven away. Where did they go to then? So I'd like to know.
I don't know. A lot of them were offered mental health type services. I know that, but a lot of times people would rather do dope than get help. Right?
Yeah,
that's just
true.
The nature of
they
doing
just pass
drugs.
them on. I'm just be curious if they pass them on to some state-run facility where they get help, or would they just?
I would hope so.
Another city?
I would hope so. Yeah. Well, so the state of California has ended up with almost half of the homeless in the United States. Like we have a metric ton. It's because the weather's so nice. The politics are a little screwy, but the weather's really nice. You can literally live outside all year. You can't do that in upper Minnesota, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So,
That's true.
all right, let's see what Ms. Kruse has to say in response to Mr. Ferguson's August 19th statements.
He obviously embarrassed and disgraced himself and the office of Washington governor even further, as if that office hasn't been embarrassed enough already after 12 years of Jay Inslee. And he refused to address, he didn't do it proactively. And so, of course, it's up to the media in the room, which is one of the reasons I wanted to go, is because I didn't have full faith that the journalists in the room would really press him on the criminal aspect of the sanctuary policies and on some of the atrocious crimes that people who are in our state getting sanctuary despite being in the country illegally have committed. The one that was on my mind, and ultimately why I decided it was worth canceling the show on Tuesday to go down there, is so I could make sure that someone would ask him about Washington State Patrol Trooper Christopher Gadd. I mean, we just went through trial for the illegal alien who killed Trooper Gadd. You know, he was just sentenced. It just happened. And Governor Ferguson hasn't been pressed about this issue enough. I mean, there's so many instances of this, right?
What's that case is she referring to?
A illegal alien killed a trooper. And I don't have access to the information in front of me right now, and Doubting Thomas is not here to give us the assist.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Wow.
But we'll post that story. Go ahead and make a note. We'll post the story in there.
Yeah, we'll post that. Yeah.
And I'm sure she's going to do it more, because I'm pretty sure she went down there and hollered at old Bob Ferguson. I'm sure we'll be getting into that. So we'll see how she presses and if they give us better information than the rest of this.
You say the sanctuary policies are to shield just hardworking immigrants, right, who just want to contribute to our community, and then he won't address this entire other segment of the problem and drug traffickers and child rapists. So I did, shock of the century, get a chance to ask Bob Ferguson a question and a follow-up when he didn't answer my question the first time. So you've used this phrase repeatedly, that we're not going to sacrifice our state's values. You know, we have several instances in the state. I see the chief of the patrol behind you. He just sat front row at sentencing while a man was sent to prison, an illegal alien, who murdered a Washington State Patrol trooper because of our state's sanctuary policies. He could have been deported multiple times, run-ins with law enforcement, but our sanctuary policies shielded him.
She's right. It is a criminal offense for them to not do what they're doing. Right. That's why AG Bondi sent that letter.
He went on to kill Trooper Christopher Gadd. How is that in line with our state's values?
Our job is to make sure we're adopting laws that make the appropriate balance, and to keep Washington working at, adopted in a bipartisan fashion, by the way, by the state legislature, I think strikes that right balance. If folks violate the law, engage in criminal conduct, they're going to be held accountable for that here in Washington State.
He's already functionally in criminal territory, even though the immigration court is an administrative style court. It is still in violation of 8 USC, right?
Right.
So
how do you see all this playing out? Like to Washington D.C. and other states, do you think they'll get a handle on it?
That's rough, man. I mean, the Trump administration is really trying to get the Democrat majority states, and understand that in the United States, there are no fully Democrat states. There's Democrat cities, and demographically, since they have so much population, they functionally run both city and countryside, right?
Yes, that happens quite often.
Right.
Certain countries,
Yeah, so the farming and country rural communities are much more conservative than the city, right?
Right.
So it's these cities telling mostly Republican-run country-style areas from their lofty towers in the cities that you're going to do all these things. And when he says he's striking a right balance, that doesn't sound genuine to me, right? She said Trooper Gadd was killed by an illegal alien that could have been shipped out multiple times before based on all his interactions with law enforcement prior. Had that happened, Trooper Gadd would still be alive. But he's not, because your policies, which apparently strike some kind of right balance, allowed a man to stay who eventually killed.
But I just judging by our own immigration laws. Once you're arrested here, say you're under international protection or any kind of asylum system, the minute you're arrested, the minute you serve your sentence here, you're deported. I presume it's the same over there?
Absolutely
or
not.
No. It depends
not with
on
places with
states.
sanctuary policies, no. And a lot of times, if you're an illegal, they'll cite you and let you go. Whereas a citizen, they would detain.
Right.
Right. That's why the sanctuary policies are so strange, right?
And as I'm saying, do you think eventually they will follow through with their threats and start arresting governors and so on?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I don't think that puts the right kind of leverage. I think what they're going to have to do is go through district court and force the states to change policy when it is in direct violation of federal law. Right? Because the sanctuary policies are in direct violation of federal law. That's why A.G. Bondi said that they're criminal in nature, which they are.
So will they do something like what they're doing in Washington eventually, where they'll send in federal resources to deal with the problem directly?
The problem is a Title 10, Title 32 problem. Again, posse comitatus indicates that federal law enforcement cannot do local law enforcement action or activity unless the Governor's Office of Emergency Services has activated the National Guard.
I'm just thinking back at what happened in California and Los Angeles, where they sent in federal resources.
Right, but those federal resources, the federal resources there did not do local law enforcement. All that
I know ICE went in and they were supported by federal resources.
Right, right. So, but the National Guard that was there and the Marine Corps when they were there was to protect those people, like to cordon off, to allow those agents to perform their job without being accosted from the outside.
Yeah.
Right.
But you think eventually that's how Trump, you think, is going to do all this?
Trump cannot force a governor, Pritzker, Hochul, Ferguson, Newsom, cannot force them to Title 32 activate those national. Those National Guard.
Do you think he'll go ahead and send in federal resources like he did in Washington, California, and so on? Do you think he'll continue doing those type of actions?
If he gets big riots, yeah, he's going to have to, because he's going to have to show his constituency in MAGA that he's willing to go ahead and put the hammer down, right? But the problem is those governors also can't allow those riots to continue on for an extended period of time. Malibu hasn't gotten 1 inch of repair done since the fires. Like, LA is insane right now. LA County is insane. Like they're not rebuilding. They're stalled out. They're not getting and giving permits. Like things are just going sideways.
Why? What's happening there with the permits and so on and resources?
Although Mayor Karen Bass said that they would be giving out those permits, they've decided to not give most of them out or make them so conditionally difficult and bring them up beyond the code from prior that people are unable to afford with the insurance money they're getting to rebuild their properties. They just can't do it because they're being held to a different standard than when the house was created, say in the 80s or 90s. The code,
yes, obviously building codes change over time.
Yes,
but that's absolutely crazy that they're not allowed to rebuild. Wow.
Oh, they're allowed to rebuild. It's just going to be so insanely expensive, and a lot. Yes,
I understand. She's put so many hurdles in place that it's making it financially impossible for them to rebuild.
Well, and the other thing is actually a couple of months prior to when the fires came down, most of the insurance companies who insure the state of California pulled out. So a lot of those people now didn't even have fire insurance when it came time for them to attempt to get that figured out. Yeah.
And what relief is there for those type of people then?
Federal relief, but it's very minor. And the LA County and Karen Bass, they're just not coming across. They're not helping the people. They're literally not helping the people. And there's some other plans in place to refurbish that with state-run stuff. So the longer this process takes, the cheaper the land will be, and the state of California can probably pick it up dirt cheap, pennies on the dollar, then build whatever the hell they want there. And it's been brought to the fore that some strange stuff like that's going on anyway.
If I remember rightly reading one time that most National Guard units have an engineer corps as such.
Right. So
could they send in those? Could they activate those type of military units to help with the rebuilding process?
They could. There are lots of engineer units in the California Army National Guard and the Washington State National Guard and the Oregon National Guard. If they wanted
just sticking to LA now. So why doesn't the governor and the mayor working hand in hand with the National Guard activate their corps of engineers to help people rebuild? Wouldn't that cut down the cost quite a lot and cut through a lot of the red tape as well?
Obviously, they don't want to help them or they would have already done that, right? They have the assets and the resources to do it. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. If they wanted to do it, it would be done.
They could do it.
They could. Yeah. They're choosing not to. And there's some end goal that I am unaware of, and it isn't to help the people. So let's get back to Washington State and Bob Ferguson.
And whether you're documented or undocumented. So I think those are consistent.
Documented and undocumented is actually incorrect. It has been indicated from the federal government that they are illegal aliens. That is the correct term. Documented and undocumented, that doesn't mean anything. You are either a citizen or you are an illegal alien, or you're some status in between where you are allowed to be here, work visa or student visa or whatever.
With the values of the Keep Washington Working Act, and we'll continue doing that.
A follow-up to the question I asked earlier, and you made the point, if somebody breaks the law, it doesn't matter if they're here illegally or they're citizens, we're going to arrest them, as was the case with the man who killed Trooper Gadd. But the point in the question was, he had had several run-ins with law enforcement in the years that he was living here illegally, where in a non-sanctuary state, they could have cooperated with ICE to remove him from the country. There's no doubt that Christopher Gadd would be alive today if it weren't for our state sanctuary policies. We also had the convicted child rapist who was just released from prison in Spokane out onto the streets. So ICE had to go track him down in the community rather than having an orderly and safe, more safe.
Yeah, so when the prison system in a state has custody of these people, they should just be doing a secure handoff to the federal government, especially if they have committed such heinous acts such as that, right? To release them onto the street just generates a lot of unsafe situations, right? The handoff in prison
you're basically waiting for the hand grenade to go off again. That's all you're doing.
Pretty much. Well, you're putting people in danger by doing that, right? Yeah. So the function is they violate social mores by committing felonies, and you lock them up, and then you pass them off to the next people who are supposed to have
I think a few people listen to our podcast not from the United States, so maybe we should explain what sanctuary city stands for a small bit, briefly.
Got it. Okay, so a sanctuary city or state policy is one that is in direct opposition to federal supremacy, and that 8 U.S.C. indicates those who are here illegally should be deported. They should be sent back to where they are from. Sanctuary policies allow them to stay in the sanctuary city, county, or state, and their immigration status is not taken into account for any purpose at all. In fact, in a lot of the places, you are not authorized to ask an individual with whom you're interacting as law enforcement if they are citizens or not citizens. They're considered a citizen of the community in which they reside, even if they're not a citizen of the United States or a resident within the state in which they reside.
Yeah. Okay. Just because I think it's good to highlight what sanctuary city and sanctuary state is, just to give people some point of reference.
And the problem is we have limited resources, medical, scholastic, all kinds of limited resources, and it pushes our establishment to the brink, right? We cannot offer those who are citizen services who have been paying taxes to ensure the maintenance of the infrastructure in the place in which they reside. So those who come from the outside who have not contributed in any way are getting access to those resources that are allocated to the citizens of the country.
I think we're kind of well used to this happening in my country at the moment, where where our resources are pushed to the limit.
Yeah, you and the UK and the United States and Canada, all of them.
Yeah, the problem is, I think a lot of what happens to an awful lot of countries is governments, especially, don't seem to plan ahead that well for their own population, and let alone a massive increase.
Really? You don't think they plan ahead?
Oh no! I think most of the Western world have.
If there's a bunch of people who are getting on little boats and crossing 26 miles to get from France to the UK, first of all, they shouldn't have been let go from France, which is the previous country from whence they came. If you set up 50 caliber machine guns, and if people who were crossing the water weren't supposed to be crossing the water, and you said, we're going to shoot your boat, and they keep coming, and you shoot the boat, then the consequences for the actions are dead people on the boat. We told you, don't do it. Right? But then once you let them in, you can say, hey, you got to go. You are not a citizen here. You go to a port of entry. There's a way to do this. If you are seeking asylum, there's a way to do it. Do it the way you are legally supposed to be able to do it, right? Because it disallows people from all over the rest of the world from getting there. Right? Just because you got to France and you got across the water, or you got to Mexico and you got to the United States, right? Like, that's an unfair advantage, right?
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's not that just they don't plan. It is if they're in exact opposition to the constituency. The UK, Ireland, the United States, Canada, we have all voted against illegal immigration. None of us want it. We don't.
Yeah.
right? Go to a port of entry, do the thing you're supposed to do. If you can't get there, that's too bad. Borders represent a difference in culture, right? But I think because we've been successful for so long, we figured we could just bear the weight. Well, now we're finding we can't bear the weight, and we're going to have to do something about it. All the G20s, all of us are going to have to do something about it, right?
Yeah, I think the difference is when you look at all the different G7 or even G20 countries, everyone agrees they have to do something about it. It's just how they're going about it is widely different from country to country. Every country is going to handle it differently.
I think we've just been too nice. We've all just been plain too nice. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. Well, people's feelings are about to get hurt. Not because I want them to get hurt. I just want the system to treat all folks with the appropriate due process, right? Whatever that due process is based on where you are, from illegal alien in a country to citizen. Like there's a different process that you are due. That's why it's called due process. All right, let's listen to Mr. Ferguson.
But also has to come down to the fact that treating people like human beings as well. So we have to be very careful of not repeating the mistakes of the past, they said.
But when the people show up in your country and they do not act in humane fashion and fail to assimilate,
obviously arrest them and so on.
Right, but it goes beyond that. There's no-go zones. There's places where they're practicing Sharia law. That's in 180 degrees from Western culture, right?
Yeah.
We should not be letting those things happen because they remove themselves from assimilation and from becoming part of the culture, right? And then they just bring all kinds of wild stuff. I remember watching Connor Tomlinson. All right, let's see what Bob's response to Brandi is here.
Transfer. So no one's saying, let's go round up people in the fields or whatever it is, but why not cooperate with the federal government and with ICE when it comes to known violent criminals who we could remove from our streets in the interest of public safety?
Yeah, appreciate it. I think I've answered that question. Any other questions?
He didn't.
That folks have?
No.
He hadn't answered the question, which is why I asked it again, because he didn't answer it the first time. And it's insane to me, and it probably wasn't audible, but when I was bringing up some of these instances, like the child rapist that they just released from a prison in Spokane, and then ICE had to go track him down, the crowd of progressives behind Bob was like, audibly sighing at me daring to bring up real life examples of illegal aliens who have done horrible things, and then the state of Washington makes more difficult the federal government's job in getting those people out of our state and out of our communities. And I'm sorry, but I was genuinely offended. No, I'm not sorry. When I went down there, right, and I was like sitting front row, and I saw the chief of the patrol, John Batiste, walk in, my heart stopped. I grabbed my chest. I was stunned. He just sat for the sentencing of the illegal alien who killed one of his young, brand new Washington State Patrol troopers, the son of another State Patrol trooper.
That's gotta break your heart, man.
Yeah, that is crazy. The fact that he went in straight after, as she said, after a trial.
Well, that's a tough dude, but I don't. How much is he allowed to act on his own? Right? The chief of the patrol is just like the head of the California Highway Patrol. Like that is the head. I
think
state.
I think his own. In this instance, I think his own rank and file would support him if he turned around and just said, "I'm not going.
I'm not doing it."
I think they would have supported. Yeah,
right.
I'm just not doing this.
I don't know, man.
It just goes to show that some people's conscience is very easily bought.
Yeah, the moral and ethical advocacy of that is like disgusting to me when it's played that way. So, all right, let's get back to it.
And I'm sorry, but he has the audacity to show up at a press conference and stand behind the governor in support of the very policies that took that trooper's life?
Oh no, he was in support of that policy?
Yes, that's what he was doing. He was in support.
Oh my God.
He made a statement afterwards in support of the sanctuary policy.
Law enforcement is supposed to be held to a higher moral and ethical level than is the rest of society, right?
Some people's, as I said, some people's souls and conscience are bought very cheaply.
Oh my God. Yeah, because they're given the right to use lethal force to effectuate law enforcement functions, right?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And the people who have the guns, you want them to be of higher moral character. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I want the ethical decision made by law enforcement in my area to be higher than the basic just civilian walking around, you know. Oh my God. All right.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was stunned, and I wanted to address actually my question to the chief of the patrol, but I knew that with Bob Ferguson, I was probably going to only get one bite of the apple. And so I certainly wanted to ask Bob that question. But I mean, this press conference was being protected by about a dozen state troopers, not only the governor's personal security detail, who are members of the patrol, but also out in the Capitol atrium. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what must they be thinking when they just lost one of their brothers in blue to an illegal alien, and they're here protecting the governor and the lawmakers who allowed it to happen and who are there actively avoiding any accountability for it. Absolutely stunned. And then, after he ignores my question and says, I've already answered that, and you can't hear it, but I start to say, when? And the mic's no longer in front of me, right? So after he ignores that question, then it gets even worse because he goes on this long, winded story to close the press conference about, and I guarantee he made all of this up, about his daughter asking him if he was going to be arrested by the Trump administration.
You know, I remember in 2017, so my year's Attorney General Donald Trump was the first president, and it was early that year, and we were, the AG's office, of course, was very involved in taking on the president. And I remember I picked up my daughter from school. She was probably 8 years old at the time, and we were walking home from school together. And she must have heard something at school that day that, like, her dad might get in trouble for, you know, challenging the president, right? She was 8, and you can understand why a kid might think that, right? That, hey, can you do that? And might you get in trouble? And she asked me about that on the walk home. It was something like, hey, are you going to be in trouble for doing whatever it is you're doing? I remember saying to her, I said, Katie, look, we're lucky to live in a country, right, where your dad or any American, right, can speak out against the president. Whether your dad can file lawsuits against the president, say things that are pretty direct about that president, be critical, stop him from doing something illegal, and I don't get in trouble, right? That we're lucky we live in a country like that, and not to take that for granted, because not every country is that way. That there are plenty of countries where if your dad did that, you'd be going to jail. I'd be going to jail, right? And you know, the idea that now I need to have that conversation with my daughter, okay, and explain, well, you know, maybe I'm not so sure about that. You know, now our country, a U.S. Attorney General threatens her father and other state officials with exactly that, going to jail. For what?
For failing to follow federal supremacy, for making laws in your state that are in direct contrivance to the federal law. It's in violation. The laws in Washington state, like in California, are in violation of 8 USC. They are specifically counter.
Right.
So.
Well, what? Do you think what he's saying there, what his daughter was true? Do you think that story was true?
I don't care. I don't care if it's true. It's anecdotal. It doesn't do anything. If you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law. And if you're saying, we want to create a balance, the balance was that trooper isn't dead. The balance is you don't allow people who are bad to stay, right? You don't suffer your citizens, your constituency to be treated in such poor fashion.
Right.
So look, I try to be careful with my words. You know, I really do, but we just really got to be honest with what's going on in our country right now. You know, we really do. And this is just taking things to an entirely another level.
Yeah, first.
Accountability. It's accountability, Bob. It's accountability, bud.
I'll take things that didn't happen for 500, Alex. Didn't happen. But second, here he is, and you can see him almost trying to force the tears out of his eyes about this conversation with his daughter about whether he would get in trouble with the Trump administration. After he just so callously brushed off a legitimate question about someone else's child who was killed by an illegal alien. That shows you what kind of man Bob Ferguson is. Not even an ounce of, you know, the death of Trooper Gadd was a tragedy. Nothing. Brushes it off, and then he has crocodile tears about his own safety and what might happen to him if the Trump administration wants to throw him in prison. He is not a good person. And that whole time, and I will just say of the media and like why we had to cancel a whole show to go to this thing, there's like 7 reporters in the room, and at least 2, maybe 3, but at least 2 of them didn't even ask a question. The whole press conference, you got the governor in front of you, the mayor of Seattle is there, state leaders are there, all of these opportunities, a big issue. Didn't even ask. He'd asked multiple times, anyone else have a question?
Yeah, that kills me. That really does kill me.
Why didn't they take the opportunity to question him like she did?
Doesn't make sense. Well, and not only that, why didn't the governor immediately say, you know what, we should do something for Trooper Gadd's family, something. Literally, we should do something, right? I don't appreciate that dude at all, right? That is really just not the way one should act, especially, right? Somebody else's child died. Your child can be unhappy that you're doing something that's kind of naughty. I get that. But someone is dead, and that has far more weight, I believe.
Well, what I found a bit disrespectful there is the fact that he just skipped over the questions. And
yeah, he didn't address it. She said, look, you're in violation of federal law. What are we going to do about it? Nothing, Ms. Kruse. We're going to let our law enforcement be killed by folks because, you know, we have special policies and all that stuff. So.
Yes. So on that sobering note, as I said, I think we'll call it there. Wow.
All right. For Patrick McCallum, I'm Alex Johansson. We are the A&P Gents. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. Help us beat the algorithm. We are out.